Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 844. I'm Tom Quigley, your host. Another year has flown by. 2025 is nearly here. The SPaMCAST 844 features our year-end panel discussion this year. Jeremy Willets, Jeremy Berriault, Susan Parente, and John Quigley, and myself, discuss AI, mixing methods, and try to forecast what comes next. This episode is a cornucopia of opinions and frivolity. Links in the show notes to Jeremy B's, Susan P's, John Q's, and Jeremy W's websites. Check them out. They're great columnists on the podcast. I really enjoy working with them. Remember, the Software Process and Measurement Cast is brought to you by Mastering Work Intake, and you need to master your work intake. It's been nearly a year since JRoss Publishing published Mastering Work Intake. Jeremy Willets and I believe our book and workshops have helped numerous organizations, teams, and most importantly, people bring order out of chaos and deliver more value. As the year winds down, we are excited to offer free 30-minute office hour sessions with both Jeremy and I. We'll facilitate the session to help you create a plan to tackle your work intake challenges. Book time, link in the show notes. Or if you don't want to, click on the link in the show notes, just shoot me an email and we'll figure it out. Jeremy Willets, Jeremy Berriault, John M. Quigley, Susan Parente, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Woo!
Woo! I've been doing this for 18 years. It'll turn 19 on January 29th or something silly next year. I don't think I did an annual thing for at least the first 5 years. I should someday go back and actually look. But then again, I went back and I listened to SPaMCAST number 1, and while I very much enjoyed listening to a friend of mine who is now dead, he was on SPaMCAST 1, the recording quality was interesting. So maybe that's
so
not fun.
We're teenagers. This is the last of our teenage years.
Yeah.
Off to college. The SPaMCAST goes to college.
Ooh.
It's now legal to drink in Canada.
All right.
I'm sure the SPaMCAST was drinking long before this day, based on some of the topics that have been covered in the past.
I don't know how that person passed away, Tom. Are we at any risk for dying by doing this SPaMCAST?
Is there a correlation? Is there a 100% correlation that people on this will pass away?
No, not 100% correlation, but I think there are probably 5 or 6 people who've been on the show that are now dead.
I'm certain we'll all be gone at some point. But
that's the way it's going to work. Yeah, it's just the show will probably be gone before we're all dead. At least I hope.
Oh, okay.
That's nice. What I'm hoping. Knock on wood. So let's start with something easy today. What's more important, how you do something or that you get it done?
Well, the engineer in me says that you get it done, but the successful project management practitioner says how you do it, how you work with people. But there's always like that quieting the other voice. Let's just get it done. It doesn't matter. It's got to get done. So it's a little battle between the left and right brain for me.
I don't know. I've seen many. Remember that previous conversation before we started where the F-bomb gets popped around? I'm not going to do it, but I will say this. I've seen many events that would cause me to use that word, and they come out because we decided our how would be we're going to shortcut some things. We won't think about why we're shortcutting or what could be the consequences of those shortcuts. We're going to just do them because we just need to get her done. And if you'd taken a moment to think about the things you're cutting out, you might have come to the conclusion, this puts us at this risk and it might not be so pleasant.
Well, as a manager, I'm not going to have to fix it. Y'all are. So why would I care?
Oh, you just keep pushing the button to try to escalate there, Tom.
I think to add on to what Susan said, I think that as transformation folks or change agent people, I think we would like to all believe that how we get stuff done is most important. But that is the thing that's rarely rewarded in my experience. What gets rewarded often is that it got done, whether it got done in the way that we or the organization got done varies.
Yeah. The reward for having accomplished the thing and the thing being accomplished means we have just overspent the project by several million and 6 or 9 months late because we had that mindset that that's a little frustrating.
Mr. Berriault?
Of course, the alternative path is not knowable. So,
see, for me, I'm just like, get it done. Now, there is a caveat to it. Like, to your point, John, like there are certain things that we have, like things have to be followed to make sure, like if you're in banking, like you have to make sure there's certain things that are hit or done to make sure nothing's put at risk. But if you're in there and you say like, hold on, this step or this whatever has like zero value. Let's just, we don't need it. It's just there for someone built a rule because something happened 20 years ago and no one questioned the rule over the past 20 years, and the rules may be completely outdated. So I think that's where you find the opportunity to kind of get those, I'm not going to say silly rules, because again, rules happen for a reason. Something happened way back when, but if everyone became complacent to them and no one challenged it, then it just keeps happening. I'm trying to remember the book. I just finished reading. I've read a couple. I don't know which title it was. I think it was the Scrum Field Guide by Sutherland's son. And he said, like, rules should always be challenged. Like, should always feel that they're challenged. So you should always be challenging the rules to make sure that they are still valid to what you do today.
Here's the rationale for my asking this question. And I think, it was sort of a warm-up question because I think we all are in the same neighborhood. But when coaches, change agents think the process is more important than actually delivering for an organization, I think they get themselves into trouble. Have we not reached that in some cases?
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom. So when you first answered your question, it was just sort of like a knee-jerk reaction, thinking that the how was like doing things right and following the process. And the how isn't always a good thing, meaning like following that process isn't always a good thing. Like Jeremy B just said, if something doesn't make sense, then should we keep doing it that way? No. And should we check off all the boxes and do all the bureaucratic things, or should we just get it done? And so now, actually having listened to everybody, I'm kind of thinking there's more of a balance, and maybe that's, I don't want to say this in an arrogant way, but maybe that's a factor in my own success, because I struggle with that, how we do it and just getting it done, that maybe I'm striking a balance of saying, okay, in this instance, I just need to get this done and forget about the bureaucracy of how. And in this other instance, I need to pay attention to the how, because the how is going to matter in how well it gets done, right? So the how it gets done, involving the team, collaborating, those are important hows. Checking the box for stupid stuff that shouldn't even be in the process, things that are waste, things that should have been removed using like lean techniques to remove the waste and junk that we do. Removing those things is great. So I think there's a balance there, and just getting it done and doing it well. What does the well mean? It doesn't always mean exactly following the process. Yeah, I think it's okay to challenge the process.
I really like the qualitative thing that you just said, Susan. I think it resonated with me quite a bit because I've seen a lot of scenarios where, yes, it got done. Maybe it got done well, but from a qualitative perspective, well, maybe it's, the story, Susan, that you told on the most recent episode of the SPaMCAST, where the one sort of lone wolf came in to work with the team sort of undercover, but that lone wolf ended up getting a lot of things done on his own. And I think that the qualitative piece of the how work got done is so important to not forget in this particular equation.
I think the minute we start talking about the process as checkbox mentality, it doesn't really matter whether it's important that it's there or it's not. That's a problem. Every step. I worked at a company once and I was going through and mapping the process for the company. And one of the first things I put, rather than here's the input, here's the process, transformation function, here's the output, right? The very first thing was the objective. Why am I doing this? Which I think is very important for your team members. Then you can make an informed decision about, okay, and I did this because I recognize that the inputs are not always exactly like you expect in work. So then you have to decide another way to achieve this objective. And before that, you need to understand, does this really apply in this case? Because a lot of times the processes are set up for a maximum model situation, and sometimes that's not very important. I would also say that my perception of this is colored by the fact that I'm largely automotive, and the consequences for making a mistake in automotive can be very costly in terms of dollar amount for rework and reputation for tens of millions of cars recalled or worse than that.
Well, that's how we get rid of our surplus population. Jeremy, Berriault, it is that time of year. Sorry, yes. I've been listening to way too much Christmas Carol.
So for me, it's interesting. Like when we start talking about like useless type rules, it reminds me of the team I worked with a while ago. They were in, let's put in quotes, Agile team, and they're doing Scrum, and everything seemed fine. And then after a couple of years of them doing all these rolling deployments and things worked out well, they got the quality out, they got their velocity up, they were able to get more tickets out. It was awesome. It was a financial institution, so we had their internal auditor come in and say, "Oh, okay, we need to see this, like a list of stuff." And I prepared because I worked for this institution before, and when I went back, I prepared it already. I already had like a wiki page or a Confluence page already set up with links. It's like, just go, oh, you want this? Go here, go here. It's going to Jira, doing all this fun stuff. And he came out, I was like, well, where's your test strategy? I'm like, go to Jira. Done. And no. It had to be on this 15, 16 page template Word document for every release. So I had to create a new document. So what I did, being the smart guy that I am, I just went through the template, added in all the links and said, oh, go to this link and find the release. And then gave it to the person and say, here, you've just passed your audit. And the auditor asked, like, well, no, it's not every file.
Guy.
Well, take a look. It says, go to this release, go to this link, you'll see the test plan. Go to this, you'll see the test cases. So I'm satisfying your criteria. I'm just not writing 15 documents because we did 15 releases over 2 years.
Smart guy?
TPS forms.
There's another word, at least down here in the States, for smart guy then. So, okay. What you're all telling me is that it depends. Who gets to decide?
A good question. I often, in my experience, it's the people that don't have to go do the rework.
Yeah. You've told that story.
That's a pragmatic answer.
Yeah,
it is pragmatic because that's just how it's going to go down. There would be some people on a mountain reprogramming vehicles in the cold, wet rain. Shouldn't it be domain expertise for that particular attribute or that process or that element? Like, for example, if we're talking about shortcutting the testing, should be of a system. Maybe the systems engineer should talk about. Yeah, I know. There we go. We're getting dangerously close to that thing that makes me animated. But shouldn't the systems engineers, rather than the executives, be making some of those calls, or maybe the verification group that understands the consequences of some of the test cases not exercised? I think it's domain centric rather than hierarchy specific.
Well, I think we just should ask either Susan or Jeremy. One of those two should always be the answer. Go to the answer.
I might be I might be all right with that. That might be better results than some of my past. So
Okay.
Not my decisions necessarily, but the ones that I get to repeat the benefits of.
Well, John, I'm a project and program manager that's also a practitioner. So I went to school for engineering, which actually makes me very odd in that space. Like a lot of my peers went to management school, and I don't know what everybody else did here, so I'm not ragging on you. But when I talk to software developers and they know I used to do software development, I went to engineering school, they tend to pay attention a little bit more because I'm not just looking from an executive perspective. I'm looking from I've got to fix the flat on the side of the road that I created, like you said. So I am very mindful of the impact that those things have on my team. And I try to be an advocate to executive management by stating risks. You'll like this, John. I state things as a risk with the impact that it will have. And that gets me some headway, even if I may not have the authority that a sponsor or higher, it's usually clients with me, have. I may not have that authority, but I can be very convincing if I state a risk with an impact that is going to be painful to them. I think that's what causes people to change, is when they consider the impact of not doing something or of doing something. So I try to be influential because often I don't have that power. I mean, I might have power over my team, and that's about it. And so, I mean, I've always thought influence is more important than power. So how do you exercise your influence for the benefit of your team? So
I barely have power over me, and rarely can even influence myself. Mr. Willets or Mr. Berriault, how do you answer this one?
I mean, I've seen hierarchy matter in discussions like this, whether it's hierarchy making decisions about how the work is done, or that the work got done, or just tacit approval. It's the management sort of applauding and praising the fact that something got done. Maybe if the way that thing got done isn't a qualitative way that it got done, isn't the way we want to work in the future. Hierarchy definitely has a part to play in this.
Usually when I've kind of gone against the grain, I've gotten myself into a lot of trouble, mostly because of my mouth, mostly because of just being blunt. It's like, why? There's no point in doing this and this and this. There was one executive team I was working with, their QA director at the time. He was getting his team to create new test cases for every bug that they found. So basically, they're duplicating, triplicating. At one point, they started off their cycle, in quotes, cycle, with like 400 cases. In the end, by like 3 cycles later, they had 1,200 test cases that they all had to rerun each and every time. Like, they set this as a process. And the executives, they didn't think of anything. They thought this was normal. They knew something was probably wrong, but they never really questioned it. And then when I came in and just said, this is all ludicrous, like, why you're retesting? And the executives are like, well, yeah, we sort of thought they were retesting. They're like, well, but why didn't you say anything? And I think part of it was there was just from the communication between them and the director, and then even the testers between the director, it was just like, just do it. It was like, okay, it's getting done. This is the way it gets done. And no one says anything. Like, that's where a lot of these, where rules don't get changed, that don't happen, is people don't speak up or don't communicate effectively. And when you don't have that communication, then basically, whatever rule was set 5 years ago is still going to get run today, but no one's challenging it.
My experience is a little different. I bring a message, identify a risk. This does not happen frequently, but frequently enough that it's a theme. I'm not a reactive person in general. I say this is what we should be doing, why this thing should happen. If you don't do this, you're putting something out there without understanding it. It's usually around testing. But I think if you become an executive at a company, probably have been very successful. You have made decisions with limited information, because that happens a lot, or even some contrary perspectives, because that also happens a lot. And you have gotten away with it by luck or by some other mechanism. And so you might choose to downplay somebody bringing something to you that's not great, rather than take some kind of proactive thing about it. In fairness to the executives, they have to bring in multiple inputs and kind of figure out which ones of these are the conflicting ones that should be prioritized. And if you're looking at a schedule, for example, a market release schedule, well, that's going to be pretty high priority in my experience.
Anytime that you challenge how somebody has been successful in the past, especially if they've been very successful, they're going to fight you over it. So it may take multiple. So yeah, speaking truth to power is important, but it's only important if they can hear it, because the answer is, like you said, Jeremy, you get yourself into trouble if they're not listening. 2024 was an interesting year. Yeah, it was an interesting year. All sorts of fun things happened. But the thing that in 2024 that has astounded me is the sort of the railroad movement, or everybody on the bandwagon that Agile has died and that Agile is dead. Now, I'd argue and have argued that it isn't dead. It's just put on a pair of mom and dad pants and obviously isn't cool anymore. But regardless, so if Agile is dead and all these movements, and I've got enough gray hair that I've seen enough of these movements that they all do at some point get subsumed into something else, what's next?
Delivery.
What do you mean
whether
by delivery?
whether Agile is dead or not, organizations still need to deliver. They still need to get things done. That hasn't changed at all, regardless of whether some form of project management flavor is dead or not. And I think we will all be able to help organizations throughout 2025 in helping them deliver, whether it's under an Agile paradigm, a waterfall paradigm, or otherwise.
It's probably some kind of mashup, actually, of those, I would think, because there's some benefit to stage gate. There's also quite a bit of limitations outward from the epicenter of the project execution and coordination to the other parts of the organization and depending things. Stage gate can a little bit helpful in control at the executive level, but when you're talking about cadence, no.
Well, my SPaMCAST column here is not a Scrumdimentalist, so my feeling on that is that Agile is a tool in our toolbox. It's like having a hammer. What do you don't want a screwdriver? You don't want a wrench? Like, I think that the answer is you look at the situation and you apply the tools. I could say hybrid, but that just ends up being a fancy way of saying look at the situation and apply the tools. I think that it's rare that something is 100% traditional. Even like construction, I have some construction students and they're like, okay, how can I do Agile? I'm like, well, so I got framing, foundation, you got like kind of phase gates there, so to speak, in construction. But do you really need to order the hardware for the doors and the plumbing when you're doing the foundation? Or could you wait a few months? Just a thought, same thing with flooring, don't need to buy flooring when you're pouring the foundation, so I think the answer is some type of hybrid, but I even like better an answer of look in your toolbox and I as practitioners, we should fill our toolbox with lots of different things, lots of leadership styles, lots of tools for project management, lots of ways of working with others so that we can pick the right thing for the right for that customer and that project, that situation.
For me, I just think back to the talk at Agile 23, like Tom, that you helped me out on, where the thing I said is like the framework is a tool. Like to your point, Susan, it was that, yeah, you just add more to the toolbox and it's your behaviors. For me, it's your behaviors and how you use them. Like you don't use a hammer to put in a screw. Unfortunately, my dad did that a couple times just because I couldn't get him the screwdriver in time. But overall, it's just your behaviors and how to get things done and try to be more efficient. Like, we all don't want to work harder. We all want to try to work smarter. We want to try to be more efficient. So it's just keeping those behaviors and not being complacent and just figuring and asking those questions like, well, why are we doing this? Why can't we do this better? And regardless, whether it's like waterfall, Scrum, Safe, Less, Crystal, P4, you name the framework, as long as you're asking those questions, you're going to get things done more effectively and more efficient.
So I'll give you two things. One thing before we jump into this, but the saying "work smarter, not harder" it's one of those where I would start using the frippity frop words that we talked about beforehand that we would have to bleep out. Because very frankly, I'd say just show me the stupid people, because I'll fire them right now. Because if they're not working smarter, then they're stupid and they're gone. So here's the thing, right? We, as an industry, are pretty young still. There are all sorts of, I don't call them fads, but things have occurred. Case tools were a thing for 5 or 6 years, and they worked, and it's uppercase, lowercase, they were generating code, and then poof, gone. Rational was a thing, and then poof, gone. CMMI was a thing, and it's mostly poof, gone. We go through these phases. In those phases, we build up a pretty massive, sort of, and in this case, agile industrial complex with 18,000 different certifications. We know, just there are a lot of them, and they're important to teach and all that stuff, but they're just a lot of them. And that information, that idea gets stuck until it dies. So I think we're all big box of Lego people. Toolbox, understand, big box of Lego, same difference, right? Take the pieces, parts that you need. Hey, I'm all in. But that doesn't seem to be the way the industry works, does it?
It's a marketing thing mostly, isn't it? For example, for me, CMMI is important because it starts to look at things as a system, a collection of systems that produce a particular outcome that you would like to have.
The SEI turfed them out. They, in essence, spun them off, and it's been sold 3 times. How can it be that important?
I don't. The thing itself, the entity, maybe not, but the thought that I am an individual or a collection of individuals working in the context of a collection of systems to produce a particular outcome, that's a big deal. And even if you're a project management, just a practitioner of project management in the context of product development, understanding that there's a bunch of like the PMI knowledge management areas. I have an exercise that I go through in a class sometimes where I take a Ishikawa diagram and I put on I extend it out, and on each one of the bones, I put a PMI knowledge management area. And at the head of the thing, this is like a pre-mortem. At the head of the thing, I put a failure mode for my project. And then we walk around the table and figure out what on these bones can cause that particular failure. And what you find out is, I have a scope delivery problem. That doesn't necessarily mean my problem that originated this delivery scope problem, was actually a scope thing. It could be anything from talent to communications to a whole bunch of other things, right? Stakeholder involvement, or whatever those other knowledge management areas. So for me, things like these things offer you a glimpse into another way of looking at how the parts of this kind of work goes together. I don't even care about the cert. As a manager of a department, I took my team off to get software testing certification, but not because I cared about the cert. I wanted us all, because it was a new department, I wanted us all to come away with some common lexicon. So when we talked to each other, we kind of knew what we were talking about. We didn't have to spend a lot of time digging into what actually was meant, because we were working from the same set of language. In that way, these things can be transitory, and that doesn't reduce their value for the individual. to the individual and to the organization. Comes, learn something, it goes. Still got my backpack full of the tools.
Yeah, why can't the next fad be playing the greatest hits like John just said with the Ishikawa diagram? I mean, how long has that technique been around? I mean, music is cyclical, fashion is cyclical. Why can't we circle back around and come up with some of these other like tried and true techniques that are still useful?
In any market, is the oldies station the actual top station in the market?
It's because modern music is not so great. You know, I go listen to 80s music and 70s music and 60s music. And there are occasional stuff in the early 2000s and even now. But by and large, I'm skewing back.
Well, there's definitely going to be a new pop market tune, and that's going to be AI. You know, there's two reactions to AI. Embrace it, the best thing since sliced bread. The other, run away from it, it's going to take my job away. Oh my God, the robots, and whatever robot movie you watched in the 80s or 90s that created some sort of dystopian reality. So there's like, I'm more thinking AI, just another tool. Like it's like, are you afraid of Google search? Then why are you afraid of AI? I mean, embrace it, use it.
Well, I think you have to. I think you have to embrace it. And having interviewed a lot of experts, some of which haven't run yet, I would argue that the message that is now being passed by the experts, the high experts in the field, is that you better embrace it, and it's going to probably kill about half the jobs. So it is going to have a deleterious effect on employment.
Does that mean you're not going to be employed, or does it mean you're going to have to be employed in a different way?
Yeah, so long as you know how to do something manual like wash floors, then you probably will be employed.
Well, I would say, or know how to use AI. I've been working with it for 2 years now.
Only some portion of the population will be needed. That's the bottom line that they are now talking. They're now talking that it will have a pretty significant impact on knowledge worker kind of jobs. And, you know, it's like you go to, I had a conversation with a large retailer who now uses an AI. They use AIs anyway, but they use AI in their hands-free, their scanners that they allow people to run, not their employees. And the answer was that they were able to actually slice 5% of their workforce. And it's not that they kept them. They just didn't have to hire anybody else, and B, the rest of them, they just cut. And I said, well, where do those people go? And he said, well, that's not our problem. Not our problem. But regardless. So I agree. I think, Susan, you were dead on. AI is probably the shining coming star, and that you either get on with it. As once upon a time I heard somebody say, it's either online or in the breadline. So, get with AI or breadline. I don't know. That doesn't have the same mouthfeel kind of thing. What do the rest of you feel about this AI thing?
Been dealing with it for more than 2 years, and what I can say is it's been a mixed bag, although it's steadily improving. You know, I did some work for a procurement house. They were working with a private equity firm, and their whole thing was material acquisition, right? And contracts, and they had a thing for aluminum. They had this application that used aluminum, and they were trying to find a way to get the cost of aluminum down. This private equity firm that had bought this company. And while everybody's scrambling, trying to figure out how to resource the aluminum and get the price down for aluminum down, I went over to AI and spent a few hours, because it wasn't in my domain. It wasn't automotive. So I spent some time learning about the space, and then I learned about the particular application, and we do a whole bunch of prompts to AI. And I asked them asymptotically approach to something good, and eventually it gave me something. I'm like, hey, and it was something that was viable. But when I pitched it to the firm and the private equity firm, they're like, this is the lead time or the vet horizon for this is too long. We'd have to, figure the formulation for this and then produce a lot of tests to make sure that it actually does the thing that we think it's going to do, because it's not ubiquitous application or use of this material. The point is just the fact that you work with the AI gets you some kind of, you acquire some skills. And there have been times when I put prompts in there and it would refer to me SAE standards. Yeah, go see that SAE standard. I go over to SAE and I go look at the standard. That's the Society of Automotive Engineers. And I go, tell me about this J standard. That J standard doesn't exist. So,
yeah, I think hallucinations do that. Those are called hallucinations, and they exist, and but they are getting rarer. The rest of you, AI, friend or foe?
To Susan's point, I use it as a tool. So I use it to help me, and to what John did, I use it to help generate ideas. So I'll throw in a few prompts just to kind of, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I'll throw in a few things and it'll pop up. Something's like, and then, oh, okay, cool. I like that. Now I'll go off and do my own thing. And like to use it for, say, even data analysis. Like if it saves me a couple hours, like toiling around with a spreadsheet, and I can throw it into an AI and have it do it for me in like 10 minutes. Awesome. Like I'm completely okay with it. Like I don't, like, it helps me get like a bunch of ideas out, and it's very, very helpful.
I'll share the view as a tool. I think the more interesting applications of AI will happen when companies have their own proprietary AIs that they can feed some of their intellectual property into. I think that will be an interesting application of the technology versus write me a song about X or whatever we're doing, with our Chat GPT prompts and on our personal time. I think that to me sounds really interesting if we can get to that point where companies can feed their own intellectual property into the AI and have it do things for them.
We are to that point.
Then you have some traceability to it, and you understand the content of the input data side.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because so first of all, I wanted to say, and Jeremy B, that I've used it to help me sort of develop a class. I don't use exactly the output it gets, but it's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. Yeah, I should use that as a topic. And then I put my own spin on it, of course, my own experience and knowledge. And then Jeremy W, I wanted to say that it's interesting. I was looking for an article I wrote, and I spent about 15 minutes looking on my computer, and then I came up with the idea, why don't I just Google it? And I found it immediately. So I used Google to find something I wrote. Like I couldn't find the Word document for the thing that I wrote, but I found it. And all I was doing is I was just going to share it with somebody. I was like, why am I bothering with the search engine in my operating system when I could be using Google to search the internet? I'd published it. And now I'm like, I won't look through my drives anymore. I'm just going to go look at Google if I'm looking for an article. It's ridiculous, but that's the power that I think companies can have. If you imagine like an AI type of search that you can do with your company proprietary data, because stuff gets lost all the time. I mean, I lose stuff on my computer, so I know companies lose stuff all the time, and AI will help you figure out what closet you put it in.
That's a lot better place to keep your lessons learned than the metaphorical white book that's a physical book back in the old days, or not. That nobody goes to look to see what happened in the past.
Absolutely, nobody
what
did.
Turned out well and what didn't.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
My take. The reality is, a lot of big companies now are doing exactly that with their own proprietary versions. So those are the hard topics. This is, I'd like to start sort of wrapping at this point, but let's start with Susan. What stands out as, in your mind, as your greatest success in 2024?
Well, it's just a little bit of like a personal, professional success.
Sure.
But I've decided that I'm in a place now where I can pick the people I work with. And it's like such a relief, because I am I'm not afraid of hard work. I love to work hard, and I do put a lot of hours in, and I enjoy it until I'm stuck working with somebody who's not going to communicate, going to blame other people for stuff, going to be irresponsible. Like you said something about stupid people. I don't even care if people are stupid as long as you have motivation and energy.
Oh, to be honest with you, that's what I meant by stupid people.
Yeah.
Box of rocks.
It's not what you know. It's like if I'm working harder than you are, and we're supposed to be doing it as a partnership, or even my students, I get frustrated with my students in class, and I'm working harder to teach them than they're working to learn. I'm like, that's not a good thing. So now I can't pick the students I teach all the time, especially at the university. But when I'm working in teams, I mean, I've literally said to somebody like, you don't think, he's like, well, what's your time look like? I'm like, I have time for anything that you or your team wants to do. I do not have time for everyone, but I do have time for you because I know working with you, we're going to be successful. And I just no longer want to be a part of teams where people are just not putting their effort in. And I dropped 2 projects this past year because of that. And I was so relieved. And then it's funny because it's like, when you're trying to furnish your house, the best thing to do is to remove the piece of furniture you don't want. The new furniture will come in quickly. Like I did that. I got rid of those things that weren't working. And all of a sudden other stuff showed up. And so now I'm moving forward with that faith and just saying, hey, if it's not the right group of people I'm working with, I don't want to be a part of it. I'll work hard, but I'm not going to work with people who aren't going to work with me.
Cool. Mr. Berriault.
I think personally, probably the biggest achievement I had this year was publishing my book. After 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears on my keyboard, I think that was like a culmination of a lot of years just trying to figure stuff out and just putting it all on paper. I think that was probably the biggest thing. I think from a professional point of view was for my firm, we've picked up, like things are starting to take a lot of traction. Now, starting a business just before a global pandemic, probably not the best thing to ever happen. But the fact that we survived through that and pushed through, and now we're at a point where like we got a lot of traction. Like Susan, to your point, like we can pick who we want to work with. Like it's no longer as like, hey, scrounging around for work. Now it's like, okay, yeah, your values fit ours. We'll work very well together and we'll get all the hard work done and boom, there we go. Like I want to be able to like jump out of bed in the morning and feel happy. I don't want to be able to drag myself out of bed. So I think we're at that point now. And I think 2025 is going to be me jumping out of bed.
No more 2025. We'll get there.
Wow. I've had a pretty good run the last 2 years. I got 5 books out in 2 years, something like that, maybe.
Yeah, this guy, by the way, if for those of you who've never looked up John M. Quigley, how many books, John?
20, something like 20.
Yeah. This guy is
20 and 23.
This guy is a machine. Yeah.
I like what I do, and I like, probably like everybody around the table here, I don't mind. I like working. I have no intention on retiring. If I'm retired, I'm probably on my way to the start of our conversation, the correlation between this podcast and the end. And like Jeremy said and Susan said, I'm in a position where now I can select the folks that I want to work with. And it's not all about their brain capacities. They're like has been said, it's their creativity. Mostly it's their effort. When you work at a big company or probably any company, you can end up working with people. And you're like, why are you not? This was supposed to be here a week ago. Why'd you tell me it was going to be here and it's not? Why this? Why is it built like this? I can't do anything with this. I can't build software or design an embedded piece of hardware based on what you're handing me here. This is pointless. Those kind of things are not, they don't seem to be happening so much, I think, which I am grateful, because that's the other thing that causes the F-bomb to slip out every now and again. That sense of frustration. I don't like to be stymied. I don't like to be held up. I don't like to be perceived to be held down physically, probably metaphorically too. I'll just find another way to get it. No, go around it. So Maybe that's a function of age, though, and the Santa Claus beard.
Maybe.
Maybe. And so I like doing this, and I like doing this. This right here is a good example. I would find time to do this all day long, no matter how busy my schedule is, because this is intellectually stimulating, new ideas kicking around, pleasant conversation, nice people. This is cool.
Well, at least, 4 of the people are nice. Yeah.
Well, one of them's Canadian, at least. I heard the language.
I was gonna blame it on me, not Mr. Berriault. Okay, Mr. Willets.
This will be no surprise. It's the book, Tom. The book that you and I wrote that we put out this year has been a significant personal and professional accomplishment. I mean, it took years to put together, but it's been really gratifying to have a book out. I don't know that I aspire to have 20 plus books out like John does, but this first foray has been very rewarding.
Yeah, so I think
it's a stupid economic model. To be fair.
Yeah. None of us get rich on books, but
congrats! It was a good book. So those of you who are listening, I'm gonna do a plug. I actually got to read and review and give feedback, and it's a good book. And if you don't have time to sit down and read it, I don't know if there's an audio version, but I read mine. The reader thing I went through had some type of audio dubbing, but anyway, always look for that as an option. If it wasn't for audiobooks, I probably wouldn't read any books at all because I just don't have time to physically open a book. But when you're walking the dog or going to the gym or whatever, so yep, it was good.
The really fun part is that all 5 of us are published authors, and we've all written, I think, relatively important things. Yeah, it's been a year that way. Okay, around the horn, quickly. 2025. What are you looking forward to? Willets first.
2025, looking at getting better at solution delivery across my giant company.
Susan.
Finishing writing books. I've started 1 or 2 that I haven't finished, and I'm thinking I should talk to John because he's good at finishing books.
He is the machine, and I do think he probably has a great deal of wisdom on that. You have written. I mean, I read the one that
co-authored.
Yeah,
2.
All right, John.
In fairness, co-authoring helps a great deal. The throughput. I'm just looking forward to the next set of challenges. I don't like my mind to be idle. It does not go to cool places when idled for too long. So I like the fast and furious. I'm okay with it.
Jeremy, take us home. Jeremy B.
For me, I am starting to look at my 3rd book to write. I've kind of already written my outline, so we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't take more than 2 years like this with the last one. But for me, I guess the challenge is, to John's point, the challenge is coming into this year. I think one of the things that I just wrote a blog about it recently, and I'm looking forward to next year, is I'm saying it's time to fix the system, right? Too many pieces, too many organizations, maybe you've taken bits and pieces, created a Frankenstein monster. Yeah, it's functional. It walks around. It could talk to a point. It can move around, but it's time to make it more flowing, to get everything kind of in sync and working together, creating that ecosystem.
Yeah, nothing like a suboptimum system, am I right?
Yep.
In Sync, wasn't that a boy band at one point?
Hey, I think you're telling in the 90s.
You're telling us what you listen to. That's not necessarily a good thing in my book.
What Jeremy said, it's kind of like for factoring, in software development. Like every now and then you're just like, oh my God, this is like Band-Aid, glue stick, whatever.
Yes.
Like let's get this in order and pretend like we know what we're doing. So yeah, I think there's some refactoring that's needed. Sure.
That has been one of the great techniques in Lean since the 1980s, because processes do. Everybody puts a fix in. And once those fixes all accumulate, because they never go away, they tend to be interesting.
Yeah, it's got to look at a thing in the context of a system of systems, and I don't think generally, first of all, my experience, root cause is generally not really root cause. It's they treat the symptom and they put a Band-Aid on the symptom so that maybe we don't see that version of the symptom next time, or within a month. Maybe 6 months or a year, we'll see it again. But And that produces a cobbled ad hoc Franken system, as JB has indicated.
Well, it'd be like saying I have cavities because I'm not brushing my teeth often enough, when the reality is I eat too much sugar.
Yeah.
I don't want
No matter how often you brush your teeth, if you drink a soda all day, you're gonna get cavities. Yeah. Like, it's just gonna happen.
I do not.
Or I spend a lot of time recovering from drinking, and the stomach acid recurringly goes over the teeth and erodes the enamel.
Neither one of those two things are my problem, and I am looking forward to having a tooth that was root canaled and crowned extracted on Thursday morning. So I'm looking forward to a good time. Okay. Just saying, it's going to be fun. Thank you, all of you. It has been a marvelous time this year. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all of our conversations, whether they're at the 7:00 in the morning one, which is a nice time of day, at least in my book. I mean, I've been up for 3 or 4 hours by then. So it's, midday, have lunch talk to Susan at 7 in the morning, or other times when we've been able to record. And I hope to at least do that 1 or 2 more times in the early new year. So thank you again. This has been marvelous. And I look forward to 2025. It's going to be an interesting year. In Reread Saturday News, admit not sleep into your tender eyelids until you've reckoned up each deed of the day large, how I've erred, what done or left undone. So start and so review your acts, and then for vile deeds chide yourself, for good be glad. Epictetus. I've read and reread the opening quote from Epictetus of chapter 14 many times. I interpret the quote as a call for daily retrospectives. This is a practice that I do both personally and professionally. The word try reflects the lack of perfection and a requirement that I continue to work on the practice. Chapter 14 of How to Be a Stoic by Massimo Pigliucci is all about continuing to learn and practice. Links in the show notes to all 15 weeks of our reread up to this point. We'll be concluding relatively soon and choosing a new book. The SPaMCAST 845 will feature our interview with David Minarsich. We will discuss AI, co-owned AI, multi-agent systems in complex environments, and governance. It's an important conversation to begin the new year in what pretends to be a complex and dynamic year. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?